I'm too nostalgic, I'll admit it.
We graduated 4 months ago. What can you possibly be nostalgic for?
I'm nostalgic for conversations I had yesterday. I've begun reminiscing events before they even occur. I'm reminiscing this right now. I can't go to the bar because I've already looked back in it in my memory, and I didn't have a good time.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This was Wes. It's time for another comic book retrospective. We're visiting Marvel, and we're going back to the dynamic duo Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Thor 154 through Thor 157, the Mangog Story. Now, this is very exciting stuff. I quite enjoy the story, but it's the visuals from Jack Kirby that really take your breath away, Breen.
It's a heck of a visual treat for 4 issues, and I'd say each issue has a page, 1 or 2 splash pages, and this was fun.
So obviously with me is Eric Breen, the voice of the voiceless, the man of the people, and we've also got comic book writer. He's a professional comic book creator, people. He's award-winning editor, Joe Corallo. How you doing, Joe?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for suggesting this one. This was quite an exciting read. Getting a little bit into the lore of Thor. You get Stan Lee at, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, maybe his best or worst as far as dialogue. It's certainly a little bit different than some of the stuff we've read in the past, but equally as good as you would imagine from these two. Like, it feels like, for the most part, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby together are kind of gold.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is an interesting time. This was coming out through about July to October of 1968. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on around then. Sort of over at Marvel, you're starting to get all the those Jim Steranko covers. He's just doing covers all over everything, including the cover for that Incredible Hulk special #1, where it's that Steranko cover where he's got his arms up, holding up the crumbling logo behind him, like that. That's just a classic cover. Comes out around now. This is also right around when Cap and Iron Man got their own lines. So you had there were only a few issues in at this point on both. Same thing with Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer just got his own series, so things are really at a very interesting point in comics. Silver Age and all that. You also had Shooter was on Legion of Superheroes at this point in Adventure Comics with Kurt Swan mostly, and then you also had the end of Doom Patrol. That final issue happens over the course of these 4 issues coming out.
So Thor 154, Thor doesn't really start with #1. It was another series before that, right?
Yeah, Journey into Mystery, and even then he didn't debut in issue 1.
Yeah, so it's an odd numbering. So you're like, oh, Thor 154, it's been out for a long time. Technically, it kind of restarted quite a few issues in here. But Bree, Thor is a very interesting character. This is a good time to be a Thor fan. As a young man, when you walked into your comic shop in 1968, how excited were you to read this?
Well, considering in 1968 I was rattling around Crosley Field looking for bottle caps.
You're trading bottle caps for comic books.
We'll go with that. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those kids that got into comics when I was really young, or I would have. I could have easily had these, but I went the baseball card collecting route before I got to comics, so I didn't get to these until years later. But going back and reading these, because when I started, I think they were in the 240s. So going back and reading these was like, you realize that of all the collaborations Stan and Jack did, I would say the 2 they had the most passion for were Fantastic Four and Thor. And it shows, and these 4 issues is a perfect illustration of that.
Yeah.
As a creator yourself, Joe, I love comic books. There are certainly modern comics that I quite enjoy, coming out weekly. But sometimes I'll be reading a comic book and in the issue, they'll drive in a car from one location to the other, and that will be the comic book. There will be things happening and things will be revealed. But when you start getting into this back stuff here, some of these back issues, and you're traveling through multiple like realms and planets, and you're hitting 15 scenes in one comic book, it's amazing what they could accomplish in like 24 pages.
Oh, absolutely. And there was just a sort of life to it. It's a whole other video to go into some of this stuff. But, I was with a friend last night comparing, took out, some like Stan and Romita Spider-Man versus some more contemporary Spider-Man, and just the colors allowing things to pop. And how dynamic, a lot of the artists at the time, Romita certainly, and Jack, of course, no one ever, I can't imagine people looking at a Thor comic that Jack did or Fantastic Four and going, man, this looks real stiff. Where's the energy? Yeah. So there's a lot. I'm glad
the art evolved from this.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see why he would be an inspiration to so many people, because he was so cutting edge. You just think of some of the artists back in the day around this time, even like a Neil Adams who's going to be coming up around or a little bit later. Just like, wow, feels like it would be home today.
Yeah, Neil's done a little bit now. He was doing a lot of cover. While Steranko was doing a lot of covers over at Marvel, Neil at this time was doing a lot of like DC covers. I think he was doing the Adventure Comics covers at this point.
Yeah, it was. So they're two men that were absolutely ahead of their time, and you can see why they've been so influential throughout comics. So let's get right into it. Let's get into Thor 154. This one's called To Wake the Mangog. This is the first appearance of Mangog, I believe.
Yep.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And we're kind of finishing up another story arc here, Joe. Thor is checking on with Lady Sif, who's in the hospital. They've had a big battle with Loki, which was interrupted by Odin because he had to warn Thor of an impending threat, allowing Loki to escape. While he's visiting Sif in the hospital, Hela shows up. She's going to take Sif to Valhalla. Thor refuses that. She also tries to enlist him into her Warriors of the Dead, and she uses an old friend of his, Hurricane, to kind of tempt him to that side. He refuses her and kind of casts her off. It was a good opening and kind of closing some threads down from the last story as we get into this.
Yeah, I also want to make it very clear to people who just heard what Wes said. That took place over 5 pages. That sounded like its own arc, like that's you could have, if something like that was happening now, it would probably be its own like 2-issue kind of reprieve in between events, as opposed to 5 pages in a comic.
Yeah, Hela making the offer would have been the cliffhanger, and then the next issue would be him, thinking about it.
Yeah, and that's not the other thing with it too is these are not these are not populated panel wise. Like these aren't all like, oh, the way you do that, you have to have like all 9 panel grids if you're going to get all that stuff in there or more. And it's like, no, it's one of these 5 pages is a splash page. One of them only has 3 panels. I mean, it's not, you don't necessarily need all that space to tell that story.
Stan and Jack definitely knew how to maximize their real estate in a comic book. That's for certain, Breen.
Oh, no question.
So after we get this kind of catch up and they close some threads off, we get into the Mangog story itself. We got a rock troll. He's investigating like a mysterious glowing cavern. I think his name is Ulick. Yep. He finds a door. There's a big warning on it that says, "Do not disturb by force of Odin." And this rock troll, being stupid, says, you know what? There's probably an ally behind here that could help us fight Asgard. I should smash the door in. And it turns out the only surviving member of like a demonic species or race called the Mangog is through there. That race was decimated by Odin. He comes through the door and just beats Ulick into submission, Breen. This was a poor choice.
Yeah, now it should be noted that up until this point, and honestly, for the first 15 years or so that Marvel did Thor, Ulick was Thor's big bad. He could go toe to toe with him and hang for multiple issues, and he was a major player in the Thor series. And this, and I think he was left over from the previous story arc, and this was to illustrate just how much more powerful this adversary was going to be, because if Ulick can give Thor all he can eat, and Mangog just comes out and goes, we're all in for, the realm eternal is in for trouble.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is. This is a good, exciting start. Back on Earth, we find that Thor has gone back to his Donald Blake form. He wants to use his medical expertise to help aid Sif. She awakes from her coma, likely to recover, so things are looking up on that end. Thor returns to kind of track down. He returns to his Thor form to track down Loki, who I guess is invisible to Thor's naked eye at this point. And he has returned to Asgard because he's going to do some type of plot while Odin is in Odinsleep. And then Thor, he thwarts a robbery looking for Loki. And then my favorite part, he scares the bejesus out of a group of hippies mocking the way he dresses, Joe. I don't like hippies, and Thor doesn't like hippies. We got something in common.
Yeah, there you go. And and yeah, through everything you're talking about here, like, so again, just really dynamic stuff. I think it's page 11 where Loki's like yelling on the street and all that, but then those last two panels of him getting ready to like basically teleport or fly through space to get to Asgard, it's gorgeous. Like you look at the fun that Jack has drawing a lot of the more out there stuff.
Oh yeah, and especially again, when we get to the stuff in the next issue.
Oh yeah.
So Breen, were there a lot of creators out there having their heroes beat up hippies? Because if there were, I need to revisit a lot more of this era.
Well, maybe not like this, but it's interesting that Stan liked to make his social commentary. Now, a book about gods and otherworldly realms may not necessarily seem like the place you would find something like that. So in just a couple of scenes, he thwarts those muggers. And I love when the cop said, yeah, these guys call themselves Muggers Incorporated. So they were obviously well organized, but no match for a thunder god. And then the scene with the hippies, which basically was Stan saying, I may tacitly support your right to be that way, but there's a better way. You don't tune in, turn on, drop out. Make something yourself. Get involved. Be part of the solution, not just part of the problem, or just be so apathetic that you just let everything happen. And I thought that was just the way it was just seamlessly put in that story. It is an indication of that the man could write, and like I said, he got to make a commentary without interrupting the flow of the story. Yeah, because it just progresses from there.
Yep. My only disappointment is that Thor didn't start cracking skulls on those hippies, but whatever. That's not a big plot point. Let's get into something that ends up playing out pretty big at the end here, Joe. We've got this lady. Her name's Carmilla. I believe they're in her castle, and she's trying to seduce a warrior named Balder. And after rebuking her advances, she shows him, I guess she's got like a hall of frozen warriors who have previously spurned her advancers. And then we see him kind of raise his sword up. Is this a continuation of some storylines leading up to here? Because she's really going after him strong. Like she's putting the full court press.
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, this is a story that continues. It goes on and on for quite a while. And I think it's touched on by most of the major players at some point that have done Thor. I'm pretty sure Simonson tackled that a bit, and I'm trying to think, but yeah, no, this is something that just continues on and on. But when you're more or less immortal, why not?
Hey, it takes a while if you're courting the immortals. It might take you a few years to lock that down. And then finally, last scene, we get Mangog and Ulick escaping the Cavern of Ages. And Mangog reveals that his plans for revenge are bigger than Odin. He's here to bring back Ragnarok. Certainly, we've all heard that name, Joe.
Yes.
So pretty big reveal, very exciting stuff. Really good introduction to the story and like lays out all the groundwork, Breen, until things pick up. The business picks up, as Jim Ross would say in the next issue.
And that's right. And I said we're off and running. Yeah, great first page of Thor. I love that the hammer in the front of the picture, and then him flying, and then talking about how it's best that the mortals just think a storm is coming, because were they to know what this actually portends, verily and forsooth, they would be sore amiss. How was that?
So we're into Thor 155 called Now Ends the Universe, and Thor is kind of waiting for Odin to summon him. He doesn't realize that Odin is in Odinsleep. Finally, he gets frustrated waiting for this, so he returns to Asgard after picking up Lady Sif, and they're certainly in a relationship at this point. And we kind of start picking up on some of the other storylines. Carmilla has reanimated the frozen warriors to attack Balder, and then we have some really cool stuff here. We get the Regalians are identifying indications that the end of the universe are coming. They check in with the Recorder, who's monitoring Ego in one of the most badass splash pages I've seen in a very long time, Joe. It's just beautiful. And we kind of learn like the black galaxy is kind of normal, so this danger is coming elsewhere. But the Recorder is certainly interested.
Yeah, no, the Recorder is a really interesting character. I mean,
make a great action figure.
Yeah, they've got Watchers, they've got Recorders. I mean, nothing gets past the Celestials except when they do. But it's. Hey, at least he's recording it. But yeah, and Ego is such an interesting villain too. I know
they just did not give the character any justice in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
No,
it's so much weirder than they could have possibly put on a movie screen, I think.
Yeah, Byrne in his Fantastic Four run has them take on Ego at one point, and that's done really well and goes into a lot of the weirdness of like, crawling through Ego and all that.
Yeah, he pops up in future Thor stories as well, as does the Recorder. It kind of reminded me of like a test run for the Vision. With the just computerized personality. Although if you read enough stories with the Recorder, he actually has a little more personality than maybe a walking tape recorder should have.
That's fair, and you reminded me during the time this was coming out, Avengers 57 also came out.
Yeah, but Recorder had been used in a previous rally in the 130.
Oh yeah.
He definitely predated him. But.
He does. No, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So we've got some ideas that may be shared between a few characters. After this, we find Loki has found the Warriors 3. They're in a barroom brawl. It turns out because Loki, when Odin went into Odinsleep, was the first in royal succession to sit on the throne. He's now the ruler until Odin returns. And he sends the Warriors 3 to go destroy the man god. And he knows that he's likely sending them to their death, Eric Breen. As he returns to the throne, he's surprised to find Thor and Sif have returned from Earth because they were not summons. And Thor is not very happy that Loki has decided that he's the ruler and was the first to sit upon the throne. He asked him, hey, can you help us fight the man god? And Loki's like, listen, brother, that one's your problem. I'm just going to sit here and be comfortable. Not very cool, Eric.
Well, Loki is a big fan of Loki. So and I don't think even in the way they do this in the story, I don't think even Loki realizes just how serious the threat is.
No, he doesn't.
Or he can't bring himself to admit it, because to him, being the ruler of Asgard is more important than anything, even though it's made pretty plain to him that
the defense of Asgard is.
If you don't get your shit together, there's not going to be an Asgard to rule. But it's almost like, there's nothing to see here. I'm just going to go stand over here and pretend like there's not a cosmos ending event unfolding before me. So, and that speaks to Loki's character, very self-centered, very cunning. And if he's going to get involved, he's going to wait until there's absolutely no other choice.
Well, so unless it serves him first.
Well, and even then, it's got to serve him, as we've seen in future, past and future storylines where they actually have had to team up.
Yeah. So what an idiot! He's soon to learn that this is a mistake, because we see Mangog. He's like on a path of destruction. He encounters like some storm giants. He brushes them aside, even though they're enormous in comparison to him, and he is just laying waste to all defenses, any type of barricade. And entire armies are being dispatched by the Mangog. And so they decide they're going to shoot. I say it's a missile. They call it a force arrow, Joe. They get a direct hit with this force arrow. Nothing.
Yeah.
We're seeing how powerful this character is.
Yeah. They tease you for like barely a page that maybe it did something. But yeah, no, man. Mangog, he lives. It's but that's what you get when you're got the might of a billion beings. So,
and we heard that a billion times. It was something else though, and as I mentioned with Ulick before, one of the great things about this story was how they kept telling you how powerful Mangog is, because the storm giants or frost giants or whatever giants they were also very formidable opponents in Thor lore leading up to this point. And you're finding out that no matter who they are, it just doesn't matter. And Mangog's just going to go through them like a hot knife through butter.
It's a beautiful montage, Joe. Like Jack Kirby knew what he was doing. Like it's a lot of fun to watch. He's destroying everything.
And just gorgeous splash pages too. They're earlier with the Warriors 3 brawl. That's a gorgeous splash page, and then you get the other one around where we're talking now of Mangog just holding up all that, rock and debris.
Yeah, so that's good stuff. So Thor notices, and he sees all this destruction that's happening, and he's like, I've got to fight the Mangog, and I'll do it alone if I have to. He bids farewell to his sleeping father, and he decides he's going to head into battle. He discovers the Warriors 3 trapped in a stone prison, and he goes in to fight the Mangog solo because he's got no backup. And it turns out, Joe, even though he's witnessed all this stuff, he has underestimated the strength of Mangog and is, kind of snatched up with ease.
Yeah. It's really great. And that whole bit there, where Mangog just grabs him in those last 3 panels. Yeah. But don't worry, the story is continueth.
Yes, we get an exciting cliffhanger. It looks like maybe Thor is going to get squeezed to death. But we head into Thor 156, the Hammer and the Holocaust. And initially, he's being overpowered by the Mangog, which we just saw in the last issue. He reaches for Mjolnir. He strikes and frees himself. And there's little to no effect other than the fact that he kind of dropped it. He kind of easily bats Thor away. He comes out kind of gloating that he's dispatched Thor, and he hears the Warriors 3 kind of mocking him, Breen, and he frees him so that he can beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, and all 3 of them behave exactly like you would expect. Volstagg blusters, Fandral prances, and Hogan, just gives it his best shot. And I said that's I've always been a big fan of the Warriors 3 because they were just, the story was made so much more fun just by them being there.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So at this point, Loki is being warned of the Mangog, and we'll kind of get into what you're talking about earlier, Eric. It turns out he's biding his time because he's got a plan. He's going to use the Mangog to destroy Thor. That's why he wants to do nothing with stopping him, so he can keep Odin in Odinsleep forever. And then he and Carmilla are going to team up and dispatch the Mangog themselves after Thor has been eliminated. Eric, this is a terrible plan.
Most of Loki's plans, for being the cunning trickster that he is, usually are. It's almost like it's a good thing that he's got smarter than he ever gives credit for brother, and a forgiving stepfather. Otherwise, he would have spent a lot more time in, Asgardian prisons or whatever. Because he's it never quite works out the way he plans.
No, it's a terrible plan, especially once he sees him dispatching all these armies and stuff. But whatever, Thor revives. He summons them up like a tornado. It starts hurling boulders at the Mangog. The Mangog is undeterred. Thor starts increasing the power that he's using until like the ground erupts like a volcano and allows an escape for Thor and the Warriors 3 to regroup. Pretty cool display of the powers of Thor here, and even that barely puts a dent in the Mangog show.
Oh yeah, no, this is, and it's all done like it's just so incredibly illustrated. It's very much like and this predates Dragon Ball Super and all of that with the constant power ups and trying to outdo each other with crazy powers and whatnot. But yeah, and the choices of colors here, Mangog really pops in all these panels. So good.
It's good stuff. So they kind of start addressing some of the other storylines. I'm gonna have to break this up a little bit, but we have Heimdall. He's on the Rainbow Bridge. He encounters the Recorder, and he's come to record the event, as the name would imply. He allows one warrior to escort him into the palace, and the Recorder finds Sif over Odin, and he deduces that the Mangog intends to draw the Odin sword to end the universe. Sif goes into the hall where the Odin sword is to defend it with her life, and then we kind of see Baldur continues fighting off these reanimated spurned lovers of Carmilla, and that he also professes Eric that he would rather die than ever say that he loves her. It's a pretty harsh stance.
Well, I think, it's more of a, he does love her, but he can't. Asgard will always come first. And it's like that woman that is bad for you. So you can't just make that commitment. So that's kind of the eternal back and forth between the two characters. And that's where we are again here.
And then we get this amazing finish. Some of this happens kind of in the middle of what I just talked about, but Thor and the Warriors 3 are witnessing the Mangog, and he emerges from the lava. Not even lava could do anything. The Mangog actually picks up lava, starts throwing at him. So Thor unleashes a flood to kind of wash him away. The water subsides. Thor goes and checks on the battle stage to see what the Mangog's doing. And it just so happens he's about to get his butt kicked again, Bree.
Yeah, and that last panel, even though it's just a tiny little right-hand corner box, is so ominous and menacing that I kind of wish that had been a full page.
Yeah.
Of him hiding?
And then the Mangog just coming out of looking like one of the heads of Mount Rushmore size.
Yes.
Yeah, I said, we know we're in for a good finish here.
Absolutely. So they've certainly established character. We get into Thor 157 called Behind Him Ragnarok. And Thor attacks the Mangog, and he witnesses it essentially deflect and throw Mjolnir back. And the destruction that happens after that, because Mjolnir hits him close or something, allows the Mangog to escape. That's pretty powerful stuff there, Joe. They keep escalating. They don't, this isn't the first thing you've done, but every time you see him, it shows you that this character, this villain, is a little bit more formidable than you could have even surmised.
Oh yeah, and I also love the cover of this issue of just Mangog just crushing Thor as he's struggling and holding tight to the hammer. It's the reds that throughout the cover, so that way Thor really pops. It's really good stuff. but yeah, like you say, opening on that great splash page, it's now we get the splash page of Mangog coming around, and it's just again, it's all dynamic, flying around. You get that that panel at the end of page 2 there of Thor all in gold and the speed lines and the hammer coming through. It's
a sight to behold here. And now this next part, Eric, the whole time I'm reading this story up to this point, I'm like, they really keep threading this Balder thing. And it's like they must really want you not to forget this storyline. It turns out it's important to what they're telling here. As Balder continues to refuse to profess his love for Carmilla, it turns out his show of bravery like breaks her spell or whatever kind of control she has over the animated warriors. She's pissed Breen, and she decides to transport Balder and the other warriors back to Asgard, and they decide they're going to join into the defense of Asgard. And as the Mangog reaches the outskirts of Asgard, there's an entire army led by Balder waiting for him.
Yeah, like I said before, I think you realize that Carmilla, although she's been portrayed as a villain, there is a part of her that can be reached. And when the other warriors, when the spell is broken, instead of recasting it, she realizes she does the right thing, and she acts like she's a woman scorned when she does it, but she does do the right thing. She sends them off into battle and to give Asgard a better chance of surviving, preventing Ragnarok. So, I said, to me, I thought that was a little bit of character growth for Carmilla, and I said, over the next 100+ issues, this continues. But this is kind of like the first time you see that, there's more to her than just that two-dimensional, femme fatale, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And Joe, as a writer, once we get the initial thing that's happening between Balder and Carmilla, once that story returns, it's for very brief snippets just to remind you that it's still happening, because they know they have to pay it off 3 issues from now or 2 issues from now. So it's not a big part. Then when you finally play it, okay, that's why they keep reminding you that's happened, because now it's time for him to enter the battle. And I think it's pretty well thread in there. They didn't waste too much time, but they certainly let you know that you need to remember that he was waiting.
Yeah, no, that stuff's important. They handle it right, and you really got a nice payoff with that page 8 splash of Balder.
Yes, of him leading the army. Yes, yeah. That was great. I enjoyed that one quite a bit. But Joe, it doesn't matter. The army is enormous. No match for Mangog. So Thor decides he's going to jump in the battle. He's going to jump in, starts fighting. He's injured, I wouldn't say immediately, but almost immediately. Balder pulls him out from danger, and they kind of retreat to the hall where the Odin sword is as a last line of defense. And at this point, Loki decides it's time for him to flee the palace, Eric Breen. Thor calls him a coward, rightfully so, and Thor and Balder join Sif and the Recorder in the defense of the Odin sword, awaiting the arrival of the Mangog.
And don't forget, we also saw them, since they'd already used the Odinian force arrow, all they had left in the arsenal was the cosmic bolt. And even that didn't work. So now it's down to, I said, a ragtag Fab Four to prevent Mangog from pulling the Odin sword and ending life as we know it.
Eric, how could anything actually pull the Odin sword? This thing is enormous.
I'm wondering how it got there.
It's got to be, hundreds of thousands of pounds.
But or just a lot of enchantment involved.
Is that what it is, Joe? Is it an enchantment? It's not really that heavy?
It looks pretty heavy.
To me.
I do some stretches before trying to pull that one out. But
I appreciate the ridiculousness of when you finally see the sword. You're like, yeah, that's no normal sword.
Yeah, Sulcher never complained about it when he'd try to unsheath the Odin swords. It's whatever.
Yeah, I'm sort of like, whose hand fits around that?
Yeah, you need an army to pull it out. But at this point, the Mangog bursts through the wall, fights Thor, Balder, Sif, knocks him out, almost immediately, and he begins unsheathing the Odin sword. It turns out he is strong enough, even though it's funny. I enjoy it just because of the ridiculous visual of it. But obviously, Jack, Jack Kirby knocks it out of the park, but it is hilarious trying to see him pull it out. And the recorder starts theorizing that the combined might of Thor and Odin can actually save Asgard at this point, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the recorder's chiming in. I guess that's helping, but it's certainly helping the reader.
It's helping the reader because he doesn't really, in the end, it doesn't do anything, Eric.
Well, but as was pointed out by Odin, recorder speakest true.
Yes.
He did speak as true, but Odin has joined the battle because he woke up just in the nick of time.
Yeah, which apparently you couldn't wake up. Now, throughout the story, you go, well, somebody wake up the old man already. But if you do, that could lead to even more problems. He has to sleep for
a full day or he'll lose all his powers, correct?
Well, it's more than that. The Odin sleep can last for as long as it needs to, as long as he needs to have it last. But to wake him before or just through other means can lead to disaster. So that's why I guess Thor had to come up with this thing that would make it organic, which I guess wakes him up. And then we find out who the Mangog has been all along.
Yeah.
It turns out he's not the last of his demonic race. He's actually like a composition of all the people that have been created into like one thing as like a punishment for defying Odin. And he decides he's a nice guy, Joe. He decides he restores the people, gives them back their land, hopes they can live in peace, and Odin is declared the victor.
Yeah, and Odin, when we first see him come back on page 18 there at that top right panel.
I like his outfit.
That it's incredible. And the blues, again, the colors, like...
Got like the pink thing on his...
But these colors are great, and this is how you avoid it being like too muddied. I mean, the colors are simple, but they're mostly flat colors here, but it doesn't look muddied. Like now a lot of times, sometimes the shading and the toning goes too overboard, and the colors just kind of all blend into each other. But here, everything really pops. And they make these sort of choices with these flat colors that, just create these gorgeous images.
They're not photorealistic. I understand that part,
Of
Joe,
course.
that they want that a lot in today's modern comics. But I personally believe that the old school coloring it looks better. It makes the heroes look cooler when they're in action, when they really pop off the page, in comparison to the background where everything's kind of blended together. Just doesn't look as exciting.
Yeah. I don't know. I find more and more people pushing back against the like photorealistic art and being like, instead
comic
of
art's supposed to be exaggerated. When you're punching somebody, your fist should be like 5 times bigger than it really would be. As you're seeing like teeth fly out and stuff. It's supposed to be fun and just over the top in entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get all of that here with Jack and all of his glory. Vince Coletta be damned. It's,
anytime Thor's wielding Mjolnir, Eric, like you could tell that's like Jack's favorite character in the book. Anytime the hammer comes out, it's the best shot.
Oh yeah, and I said, this story again. We talk about these. This was an incredible story. And obviously it showed how much Jack and Stan love these characters. But no story is perfect. So let me start real quick. What I loved about this was a character as powerful as Ulick is basically discarded on page 2 of the second issue of this story because there was nothing more he could add to it. So they did the right choice by just, like I said, not even, hey, where'd he go? It just didn't matter. Gone. To come back to plague Thor another day. On the bad, when we find out that this was basically a construct of Odin, or as he said, 'twas an imagery, 'twas an illusion. Well, that imagery and illusion killed a bunch of immortal warriors, and I'm sure the person who's most happy at the end of this was Hela, because she added a bleep ton of warriors to that army she tried to get Thor to join. And so a lot of guys gave their life for a punishment that Odin had decreed, eons ago So, and I don't think that's ever mentioned because at the end they're celebrating. Like there's the guy that Thor encountered in the end of 155 who died in his arms, and all the other ones that died. So I mean, it's like, I know I'm nitpicking because this was a hell of a story.
Sure,
I did there.
Yeah, and then the ending wasn't like the most bombastic, big fight ending. It was a big reveal, and Odin had to, I guess, remove his spell and return them back to their original form. So I don't know if it was anticlimactic, but it was certainly exciting. And then you get the big reveal. This has to be the last time we see Mangog, right? Once they've been returned to normal.
He comes back. What was it?
Of course he comes
back.
No.
No. But I mean, like, he comes back like, it's not exactly every 50 issues for a couple of times, but in or around, he comes back closer to 200. He comes back closer to 250. I'm just blanking on the exact.
I think he was in 250.
He was in 250? Okay.
I believe he was.
Yeah. And then he'd also got used in Dan Jurgens' run and a couple of times more recently. But yeah, he's an interesting character.
Yeah, he's kind of mindless, bent on revenge, wants to bring on Ragnarok. The other thing I like about this, Eric, they don't really dive into it. I like the idea of Thor and Sif being in a relationship. Why doesn't that keep going? It feels so normal.
It did, off and on for decades to come. I think at this time, there have been times when some of Jane Foster's life force have been in Sif. Sif has given her life force to save Jane. It's sort of like that triangle, and then eventually they just wrote Jane Foster out for years.
Why
doesn't
doesn't Jane Foster become Sif then? Why does she become Thor? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you know why. But that's neither here nor there for this video. Now, back to we talking about anticlimactic. Something that Stan and Jack did that I thought might have been the smartest. I'm not going to call it trope because they didn't do it all that often. When you have a villain that the hero absolutely has zero chance to defeat through normal means. It happened in the Galactus trilogy where they hold the ultimate nullifier on him and then they turn it over to him because they trust him to not turn around and eat the earth. This with the Mangog, it basically Odin wakes up and says, "Oh, my bad." But it's not really the ending that matters. It's everything that leads up to it. And that's something that older storytellers seem to get because they packed so much into the journey getting there that once you got there, it's okay that it would end this way because it wasn't so much about the ending. It was how you got to it. And that was something Stan and Jack did better than anybody before or after.
As a writer, Joe, if you use the Odin's magic, to kind of fix everything in the end, you could call it MacGuffin, perhaps the Deus Ex Machina. It would get old soon, but if you use it strategically and you only use it here and there, it's certainly a tool that you can use in your writing arsenal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's more the overdoing it kind of thing that gets to people. But yeah, I mean, if someone were tackling this story. Not even today, but, I'd say even by like the late 70s, you'd have probably seen like the story kind of end with maybe Loki starting to cause mischief by, trying to get a rise out of some Asgardians about like how this is Odin's fault and stuff like that, and kind of like sow some the seeds of discontent that would go into issues coming up. So yeah, I mean, I think this works just fine, but yeah, there's other ways I think you'd see it done today or in the 80s, 70s, but yeah, I think it all, between all of the incredible visuals and, getting yourself into that corner and being like, well, the thing I think that because we've read so many stories at this point, it's easy to go that far and past, like, oh, that's kind of anticlimactic, instead of like hanging on to the fact that Stan and Jack let it go as far as it did.
The heroes never gave up. They were fighting to the very end, knowing that they probably couldn't win, and putting up resistance and buying time for Odin to wake up. I've certainly seen that in other stories before.
Yeah, and it's not like every issue of Thor before this is someone always coming into the hall and pulling out, the Odin sword from the sheath. So like that's, it is a dramatic thing.
Absolutely. So Eric, this will be my last question for you. When you think about the annals of Thor writers, obviously, it feels like a lot of people put the Simonson run at the top of the heap. Is the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby run underappreciated, or is it right up there with it? Where do you think it is?
Well, okay, when I think of that, the first thing I do is disqualify Stan and Jack, because without them, none of the other ones matter. Mm-hmm. So, Walt Simonson did an incredible run. I will still, I said, take Stan and Jack if I add them back to that. Dan Jurgens had a great run. Jerry Conway's run wasn't bad. Len Wein had a good run in the mid-'70s. Hell, J. Michael Straczynski had a good run in 2007 and 2008, and Kieran Gillen followed that and kept those threads going. And so as far as like my time with didn't want to leave out Roy Thomas, and a guy that never gets any credit. The guy who wrote a very fun run of Thor was Tom DeFalco.
Yeah.
And so Thor has been in good hands multiple times with multiple takes. But again, without Stan and Jack creating that universe or that big sandbox for them to play in, none of that happens. So no matter which Thor run is your favorite, and most people haven't been around long enough to have read all of the Stan and Jack.
Yeah.
If nothing else, this shows that the most creative person in the history of comics is Jack Kirby, and that's the end of that discussion. There is no one else you can put in that.
It'd be hard to debate that one, Breen. It's just, it's not one of those things when you talk about, Stan and Jack working together. Not a lot of people are like, it's their Thor run, that's up there with Fantastic Four. But after reading this, I definitely want to check out some more. It feels like it should probably be held in higher regard. Joe, I know you like collections.
Mm-hmm.
If people wanted to find this story, obviously getting the original issues is going to be hard. What collections are there for them to go out and find the story in?
Yes, that epic collection that Breen is holding up right now. It's the volume 4, I believe, the epic collections.
It is.
And then it's also in the volume 3 of the omnibuses of Stan and Jack stuff. I mean, it's not all Stan and Jack stuff in volume 3. That's like they leave the book during that. But I believe volume 3 is still in print. Volume 1's been out of print for a while, but we're getting a reprint later this year. So that's exciting for for everyone who missed out on the first volume, because it's been out of print for a little bit now. They're putting them back in, so that's one of the best things about them doing these movies is getting this old stuff back in print.
Absolutely. So good stuff. If you want to find it out there, it is available, and it's going to be hard to get those original issues. Don't know that they've printed all as reprints or anything like that. I do want to say thank you very much to Eric Breen and Joe Corallo for joining me, doing a great retrospective. This was a lot of fun. It sounds like we're going to be doing perhaps Legion of Superheroes next week for DC, but we haven't ironed it all out. But we're going to be doing something cool, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it'll be good.